It's day 8 of YT History Month, and today, on International Women's Day, we're closing out our first week on white foundations by talking about proximal power. Proximal power is what happens when marginalized groups align themselves with oppressive systems because it grants them certain advantages. Some black people own slaves. Some Hispanic people vote for politicians that shit all over immigrants. Some LGBTQ plus people defend policies that erase their own rights. Just because a person can participate in a system doesn't mean that it was built with them in mind. And that's why racism isn't just prejudice, but prejudice plus systemic power. And that's why a black person disliking white people just doesn't have the same stank on it as a white person enacting policies that disenfranchise entire racial groups. And the biggest historical and modern day purveyors of proximal power, YT women, who have for centuries benefited from being white even while being oppressed as women. During slavery, they were the mistresses of the house, often just as cruel as their husbands. When enslaved black women were essayed and forced to bear children, white women didn't intervene. They tallied up those kids, from day 4, we learned that they called them pups, as property. And let's not forget the suffragette movement, which fought for white women's right to vote while actively excluding black women. Fast forward to the Jim Crow era, and white women were at the forefront of fighting against desegregation. Those images of screaming mobs hurling insults at black children integrating schools, that wasn't just white men. Perhaps you've heard of the supervillain power called white woman tears. They can actually wield their distress as a weapon. Emmett Till was murdered because of a white woman's lie. Countless black men were lynched because of just accusations. And today, we still see it with white women calling the police on black people for, let me check my notes, grilling in a park, sitting in a Starbucks, or bird watching. Their fear is prioritized over black people's safety because whiteness is always centered. Now, what do we do with this information? We learn to identify abuses of proximal power, grow our vocabulary to better define it, and when we see it, always call it out. So to all my European American sisters, you have a choice to stand up for justice or to uphold whiteness. Unfortunately, history tells us which choice you've made time and time again. In this decade alone, YT women voted for a known essayer and misogynist in the majority, twice. But black women have always known that you believe your whiteness offers you more protection than gender solidarity does. But the question is, especially knowing what we know now, what will it take for you to finally join us on the right side of history?